Hello, I'm Davis Thompson, and I'm excited to begin this journey with you discussing William Shakespeare's great tragedy, Hamlet, the Prince of Denmark. This is my intro video where I sort of just try to entice students into getting excited about reading the play and just ask them a few general questions, because I don't think you need to do a lot of prelude to get into Hamlet, just a tiny little bit. But I've made my background black because that is the color of this play. I usually begin by asking students what do they know about Hamlet, because even though they've maybe never read this play, the play is so entrenched in our culture that I always joke that once you've read Hamlet, you're going to hear a quote from Hamlet every single day of your life for the rest of your life. It's that quoted a play. So when I ask this question, I typically get maybe a student who says the phrase "to be or not to be." That's pretty common. Or sometimes they know that Hamlet has a knife. Sometimes they know that. Sometimes they know he wears black. A lot of times they know he's holding a skull at some point. But I just try to, activate the students' prior knowledge and see what they know about Hamlet before we get into the play. And then I start talking about the play a little bit. I point out that this play fits into a genre. It is a tragedy, of course, but it's more accurate maybe to think of it as a revenge play. And then I just want to point out to students that we love revenge plays. Most Hollywood action movies or blockbusters tend to be revenge plays. And there's a simple reason for that. We, as human beings, like justice. From just being a little toddler, we understand when something is not fair. And we want things to be set right. We want things to match up. And revenge plays are particularly satisfying because one thing we think about when we read Hamlet is that revenge and justice are not exactly the same thing, but they kind of Venn diagram a little bit. In a revenge play, somebody has been wronged, and we always feel for somebody who's been wronged, and we always forgive them for almost anything that they do on their way to making things right. There's many, many different movies I could choose from to talk about this, but the one I particularly like lately is the movie with Liam Neeson titled Taken, where at the beginning of the movie, if you've seen it, his daughter is kidnapped, and she gives him like a panicked phone call as she's being taken away. And Liam Neeson is furious, a protective father, and he starts on a journey for the rest of the movie going to get his daughter, and he does incredibly violent things to get to her. And we forgive him for everything, and we approve of everything he's doing because he is going to get his daughter. And so we feel really good when he finally does rescue his daughter, spoiler alert, because we think things are set right. And so we're going to see that Shakespeare, locks into that, this idea of revenge and justice, and it makes the play tremendously compelling for most people. Hamlet is weird, though, because it's not just an action movie. It's not just a revenge play. It's a revenge play that is also a psychological drama. We have this character who's very complex, Hamlet, and he thinks very deeply. And the questions he asks are some of the biggest questions we ask in our whole life. So we are thinking about, for lack of a better word, the meaning of life when we read Hamlet. So it's like watching an action movie with Bruce Willis or Fast and the Furious. If you watched Fast and the Furious and it made you have sort of existential thoughts about who I am in the world and what is my purpose, which typically isn't what happens when you watch an action movie, but it is what happens when you watch or read Hamlet, which is why it's such a weird beast. It's a satisfying action movie on one level and a deep philosophical meditation on another level, and that's another part of life that a lot of us like to think about as well. So, a few facts about Hamlet. It is the longest play Shakespeare wrote, and you're going to get to claim that you read the longest play Shakespeare wrote. It is the most quoted play that Shakespeare ever wrote, possibly the most quoted play ever. It is extremely violent. It might take a while to get there, but it's a sad fact that people love to watch violence, either horror movies or action movies. We just like to watch people fight. Like many of Shakespeare's plays, it's based on a Danish legend, meaning that Shakespeare often took stories from somewhere else and turned them into stage plays. He was kind of an adapter. A lot of people don't know that Romeo and Juliet was an Italian poem that he read and turned into a play. And so this one is a Danish legend that Shakespeare did not create, but he's definitely embroidered and made sort of more memorable. The play is a wonderful play to teach, maybe my favorite Shakespeare play to teach, because it has so many different facets to it. It is very funny, which I think is important. It is frustrating, it is sad, it is noble, it is beautiful. It's all all these things at the same time, and when you take all those words and you add them together, you end up with the word tragic, which is kind of going to be the big word we're thinking about as we read the whole play. Like, what do we mean when we say something's a tragedy besides that it is sad? Because Hamlet is more than just sad. It is sad, beautiful, and funny. The play is very complicated plot-wise. We have 3 revenge plots, sort of a triple action movie, if you will, and it takes a bit of work and attention to get into it. But some people say that's what makes the play hard to teach, but I actually think it's what makes the play very easy to teach, is that students like the fascination and the complications of the play, the court intrigue, if you will, the political and personal aspects of the play, because it resembles life, so they tend to like the play quite a lot. Hamlet, Shakespeare wrote 39 plays, and Hamlet's the one that might be the most famous, and there's several reasons for that, for why we think it's special among Shakespeare's 39 plays. The primary reason is because we do know from historical documents that Shakespeare's son, whose name was Hamlet, died at 11 years old, possibly of the Black Plague, and some people like to say, possibly romanticizing Shakespeare a bit, that he wrote his greatest play and named it after his deceased son. We do know for a fact from historical documents that Shakespeare himself, who was an actor, writer, producer, sort of a triple threat, he played the part of the ghost, the dead father in this play, in original productions of the Globe. We also know that this play might be special to Shakespeare because Hamlet, as a character, is an actor and kind of a director and kind of a playwright himself, so he seems to be something like Shakespeare. It's very hard to read some of Hamlet's comments about acting and not think Shakespeare must have thought this too, although that's always a little bit of a dangerous game to play. I always say that the play is a play of 3 things. They're not positive things. It's a play of problems, a play of questions, and a play of delays. It even opens with a question, and Hamlet is a questioner, as we'll find out as we read the play. The word thwarted might describe the play for the first 4 or 5 acts. Thwarted is a hard word to say, and it's frustrating, and that's what we're looking at, is a character who kind of wants to do something for 4 acts and can't accomplish it. I feel like everybody, but especially students, relate to that because there's so many goals we have in life, and we're like, why am I not accomplishing my goals? Well, your goal might not be to kill your uncle, but you have a goal, and you're like, why am I not doing this? And you'll feel something for Hamlet on that level. It's a delayed play, and it's sort of like it just builds up like a dam, all this pressure for 4 acts, and then in Act 5, which I call the apocalypse, it finally brings all the plots together to a satisfying end. And I do think it's a very satisfying conclusion with some questions there, but generally I don't think anybody reads the play and finds it disappointing, and if anything, you're impressed that Shakespeare could wrap it all up, and we'll see if you're impressed as we read the play. So, what is the play about? Perhaps no other play in English has had ever so much written about it, and there are many different ideas of describing what is Hamlet about, but we're going to focus on one main idea, I think, or maybe 2. But I think this is kind of the best question. How do we live an ethical life in a world filled with corruption? That's sort of a depressing question right from the start because it just acknowledges that the world is corrupt, which is, I would say, a stone-cold fact. And Hamlet is a young man, just like people studying this play in high school are young men and women, and they're going into the real world after college, and the real world is corrupt. And how are you going to lead an ethical life in that? Hamlet's trying to be ethical at the same time that he's actually trying to murder somebody. So we'll kind of see if that's complicated. Another question, I sort of like this question too, is how do I figure out my purpose in life, or how do I come to accept it? Because we watch Hamlet basically flail around for 5 acts, and we'll see if he changes and comes to accept his life. And that's similar to a lot of our journeys in life. So traditionally, when you study this play, he's the title character, Hamlet. He's not a king, as most of Shakespeare's titles are kings, excluding like Romeo and Juliet and Julius Caesar, things like that. But we're not going to make this play just about Hamlet. We're going to try to up the tragic nature of the play, and we're going to make this play sort of a tragedy for everyone. Politically, personally, every single character is kind of tragic in one way or another, and that makes the play even more powerful, I think. So when the play opens, the play has such a great opening. It opens famously, as they say, in medias res, like right in the middle of things, is the oldest trick in the book. Homer did it in the Iliad and Odyssey. When the play opens, Hamlet's father, King Hamlet Sr., is already dead. and his uncle Claudius, Hamlet's uncle, has taken the crown and married Hamlet's mother. He will announce this in scene 2, that he has married Hamlet's mother very quickly after Hamlet's father's funeral. And as you can imagine, Hamlet is not particularly happy with these events, his mother moving on so quickly, and there is some question of, why isn't Hamlet the next king? And we'll deal with that as we go. The play does not open with main characters, though. Like a lot of Shakespeare plays, it has minor characters. We have these 2 guards, Francisco and Bernardo, and they're on the top of the castle Elsinore, on the battlements, late at night, at midnight, and they're frightened. We see one guard all by himself, and he is alone, and they've been seeing this ghost walking the castle battlements that looks like King Hamlet's father. He's all in armor. He's been walking around not saying a word, and so every night they're sort of terrified that the ghost is going to show up again. And indeed, Bernardo is standing guard, probably foggy and dark, very hard to see, and he sees a figure approaching and he doesn't know if it's the ghost or if it's a human being and the guard that's coming to relieve him from his watch. So he asks the first line of the play. He says, "Who's there?" because he doesn't know who's approaching. And this sets the tone for the whole play, as we'll talk about. They are going to see the ghost. They're going to exchange, as they're talking and they're exchanging guard, they see the ghost and they freak out. And they have asked a nobleman named Horatio, who happens to be Hamlet's best friend, to come up to the castle and witness the ghost as well. They're lower class guards, uneducated, not important, really, socially speaking. And so they want somebody with some cachet, some power, Horatio, to also testify that they've seen the ghost as well. They know the ghost looks like King Hamlet's father. They don't know why he's walking. They don't know why he's here. They don't know what's going on. So there's a lot of questions when the play opens. And that's what we're going to read for next class, is scene 1, which I titled "The Ghost Walks."